Living a Life of Zero Tolerance, DUI and Your Right to Drive, Part 1. Nobody can deny being aware of the risks posed by consuming alcohol and other substances. You are better informed about the risks than most people because you have seen every video in this section. Do you choose to overlook those risks like so many people before you did in order to go forward? Or, do you swear to adopt a zero-tolerance policy for alcohol and drugs in your daily life? Drinking alcohol and using some recreational drugs might not be against the law, depending on your age and where you live. However, these behaviors will always be detrimental to your physical and psychological well-being. Additionally, even though consuming alcohol is different from drinking and driving, the former frequently results in the latter. As you can see, drinking too much leads to shaky judgment and reckless actions. Even if you might think you wouldn't drive after drinking now, alcohol consumption can change your perspective on everything. When intoxicated, it is impossible to recognize your limits. Lives are ruined by drunk driving. This frequently refers to both the drunk driver's own life and the lives of other people. You run the chance of killing yourself, a loved one, a friend, or a complete stranger if you decide to drive while inebriated and choose to disregard the dangers and the law. You can wind up in jail, lose your driving privileges, become bankrupt, suffer catastrophic injuries, or be rejected by your friends, family, and community. These are very real, obvious hazards, not improbable outcomes. While it may not always be simple, guarding against these undesirable results is at least simple. Avoiding alcohol altogether is the simplest, healthiest, and most efficient strategy to prevent drunk driving. Suppose you do consume alcohol? Even if you are completely dedicated to abstaining from alcohol, you must take into account the risk that you might alter your mind later. If you do drink, you need to know how to keep from doing something risky, like deciding to drive drunk. Keep in mind that alcohol will cause you to lose your sense of judgment and prevent you from understanding how drunk you are. If you consume alcohol at a party or at home, you could subsequently feel tempted to drive yourself or your friends to a restaurant or just home. None of these behaviors excuse driving while inebriated. You must not drive, even if you are anxious to get home before your curfew and do not want to upset your parents. If you have been drinking and are tempted to drive, consider which of these consequences would be worse because alcohol distorts your views and impairs your ability to balance your options. Making your parents angry or horrifying them by dying in a drunk driving accident? Killing a stranger or disappointing a friend? Missing a party or spending 10 years in prison for vehicular manslaughter is more costly. The truth is that there will always be other perfectly fine choices available to you, regardless of how desperately you feel the need to drive. Anything is preferable to driving while intoxicated, even if your alternative options aren't the best. Take a cab instead. Drinking alcohol does not have to prevent you from going any place you want, including home, seeing your friends, and going home, providing you are in a fit state to do so. Even though you might not be able to drive alone, you can still find a ride. Take turns being the designated driver with your pals to make sure you always have a ride home. There are many different methods to go home even if you haven't prepared ahead and nobody else is sober enough to drive. For illustration: 1. Take the bus or a cab. The majority of towns and cities offer late-night cab services in addition to public transportation. Even if you reside on the other side of the state, your life is more valuable than the expense of a taxi ride home. 2. Make a call to a friend or relative. Anybody who cares about you would prefer that you phone and request a ride instead of driving yourself home after drinking. It is usually preferable to avoid taking your automobile with you in the first place because if you did, arranging a ride home will require leaving your car where it is and picking it up the next day. However, returning the next day to pick up your automobile is not uncommon and many people do it. A car left overnight in a secure location is much less likely to sustain damage than one driven by a drunk driver. The alternate is to remain where you are if you can't get a ride home after drinking. Even while sleeping on a sofa or the floor isn't as comfy as sleeping in your own bed, you will survive the night undamaged. If you've had a few drinks at home and are inclined to go for a drive, resist the urge. Going to your favorite restaurant or skipping a social function won't kill you, but driving while intoxicated surely might.